David Kato was known in Uganda as a hero. He was a LGBT rights activist and a teacher in Uganda. And unfortunately, he lost his life. He was killed in his own home in 2011. This is after he was publicly outed. Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz. Today we're going to be talking about David Kato, or David Kato Kisuli. Now, he is a very well-known activist in the community, in the LGBTQ plus community. He was the first Ugandan openly gay man. Now, he's also considered the father of the Ugandan gay rights movement. He also served as an advocate for or an advocacy officer for the sexual minorities of Uganda. I wanted to cover this true crime case because of his activity, because of his notoriety in our community. If you're new here, this month is all about crimes against pride, basically. I think that's what I'm going to call it. Crimes against Pride Month. We're dealing with Pride Month awareness is all of June. So we're going to be dealing with true crime cases that involve people that are a part of the LGBTQ plus community. And like I've already covered, the gay slayer, the grinder poisoner, Muhammad Ijaz. There's a lot of cases that hit home with gay pride and LGBTQ plus pride. There's a lot of cases that, and especially a lot of murders that should not have happened because a person was just trying to be themselves. And I wanted to cover his murder because of his standing as being an advocate for gay rights in Uganda. He was publicly outed as being a gay man in a magazine, and he was not out basically at this time. He was highly involved in the underground LGBT rights movement in Uganda, and he became one of the founding members of SMUG. So SMUG was the Sexual Minorities of Uganda, like, association, and he became one of the founding members on the 3rd of March of 2004. Now, he would speak at the United Nations funded Consultative Conference on Human Rights, and this was in November of 2009. And during this conference, this is when he spoke of the issues of the LGBT rights and the anti-LGBT atmosphere in Uganda. Now, members of the Uganda Human Rights Commission openly joked and snickered during his speech, which I hope they were publicly chastised for that, because why would you do that during somebody's speech? You have the floor when you speak, you give him the floor when he speaks. Don't do stuff like that. That's just rude. So there was a rumor that was circulating after this that David Bahati was the leading proponent for a Uganda anti-homosexuality bill. Now, he had ordered the Inspector General of Police to arrest David Kato after his speech. And this caused David Kato and others, other attending members of SMUG to leave the conference absolutely immediately. This was after he finished his speech. They had to leave. Now, David Bahati then made a tirade, like basically a giant temper tantrum against homosexuality to the conference. And this resulted in apparently a massive applause, and Martin Sempa, who was an Evangelical Christian clerk, pounded his fist on the table in agreement. So none of these people wanted to hear what David Kato had to say, and they all treated him like a piece of trash, which is absolutely disgusting. So by 2010, David Kato quit his job of being a school teacher so he could focus his work with SMUG in light of the events that happened, especially with the Uganda anti-homosexuality bill. So David was given, subsequently, David had been given a 1-year fellowship for the Center of Applied Human Rights that's based out of the University of York in the United Kingdom. So this center really focused and provides fellowships to those who are vulnerable and are threatened or feel threatened because of them being human rights activists. Now, as a reprieve, this is a reprieve from the dangers that they basically face in their own countries. So David was given a way out, basically, so he wouldn't face any danger from those in his own home country, basically. Now, in October of 2010, he was publicly named among 100 people now whose names and photographs were published in Rolling Stone by a Ugandan tabloid newspaper. And in the article, this calls for their execution because of them being homosexuals. Now, David Kato and 2 other SMUG members, him and 2 of the other members were named in this article. Kasha Nabagasera, Pepe Julian Onziema. So they ended up suing the newspaper to force it to stop publishing the names and pictures of people in it that are believed to be gay or lesbian. These photos ended up being published under the headline of Hang Them, and they were accompanied by their own individual addresses. So basically it was just a calling card of, here, go kill them, basically. Now, there was a petition that was granted on the 2nd of November of 2010 that effectively ruled an end for Rolling Stone, which was the Ugandan tabloid newspaper. Giles Muhane, who was the managing editor of the paper, commented saying that, I haven't seen the court injunction, but a war against gays will and must continue. We have to protect our children from the dirty homosexual affront. So on the 3rd of January of 2011, they ruled that the publications and list and the accompanying citations of violence that threaten David and the others' fundamental rights and freedoms, that also attacked their human dignity and violated their constitutional right of privacy. So basically, the court ordered the newspaper to pay David Kato and the other 2 plaintiffs 1.5 million shillings each. That's approximately only $600 in, like, U.S. money, in the equivalent of May of 2012. So it's not a lot of money, but they ended up winning the lawsuit against them. It wouldn't be very long before David would be murdered. So on the 26th of January of 2011 at around 2 p.m. Now, after he was talking on the phone with his fellow from SMUG, his fellow friend, Julian. Now, he talked on the phone with him for a few hours, like, before this happened, but David would be assaulted in his home. He was hit by a man twice in the head with a hammer. This man then fled on foot. David died en route to the Kawalo General Hospital. David's colleagues said that he spoke of an increase of threats against his life and a harassment against him since the court victory, and they believed that his sexual orientation was, like, what caused the anger behind his murder and was the motive for his murder. Now, Joe Oloka Onyango, he worked with David on the court case against the newspaper. He said that it was a very strange thing to happen in the middle of the day and suggested that this was all premeditated. Now, according to the New York Times and the Sydney Morning Herald, questions have been raised about his murder in it being linked to his sexuality. The Human Rights Watch and the Amnesty International both called for in-depth and impartial investigations in his case for the protection of gay activists. James Nsaba Baturo, who was the Ugandan Minister of State at the time, State of Ethics and Integrity, is on record having declared that homosexuals can forget about their human rights. I don't know about you, but that pisses me off. How can you be a minister of the state for ethics and integrity and say that homosexuals don't have any rights? They are a person in your community. They do have rights. There was a police spokesman that initially blamed the murder as being a robbery, and specifically on robbers who had killed at least 10 other people in the area over the last 10 months. So they arrested one suspect who was David's driver, and they were seeking a second. Now, On the 2nd of February of 2011, they ended up arresting Subuga Enoch, saying that he had confessed to the murder. Now, there was a police spokesman that described Enoch as being a well-known thief and a local gardener, but he stated that his motive, it wasn't robbery at all. It wasn't because he was an activist. It was because of a personal disagreement, and he can't say more. That's what the police stated. Now, apparently, the Uganda Monitor alleged that Enoch had murdered David because David would not pay him for sexual favors. So they're just spinning this in another way. Now, this is an allegation that's been repeated by the Ugandan ambassador to Belgium in a letter to the European Parliament President Jerzy Buzek. Now, the Ugandan ambassador later reiterated this version of events in a letter to the European Parliament and stated that David had earlier paid for his prostitute to be released from prison, but had then been attacked by him for refusing to pay for sex. None of this makes sense, especially for him. This screams cover-up to me. Enoch would be sentenced to 30 years of hard labor on the 10th of November of 2011. Now, they only list that the motive is robbery, not that it was charged by the hate of homosexuals. That it was just robbery. Now, David's funeral was held on the 28th of January in Nakawala. His friends and family and co-activists were present at his funeral. Many of them wore shirts that had his photograph on them. And in the front, there was the Portuguese words, La luta continua. So basically, I believe loosely it means, or this was a rally cry during Mozambique's War of Independence. So they used it as well for this. And they had that in the back, and there was rainbow colors on the sleeves. So there was a Christian preacher at the funeral. He was an Anglican pastor. His name is Tomek Musoki. He preached against the gays and lesbians that were present, making a comparison to Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah are biblical cities that were destroyed by God for their wickedness. So before the activists ran to the pulpit and then grabbed the microphone from him, they forced him to retreat and from the actual pulpit, and they went to David's father's house. So there was also an unidentified female activist that was at his funeral that was extremely angry and said, "Who are you to judge others?" Because here's a person that's just supposed to preside over a funeral, but yet he's attacking people that are there. The villagers refused to bury David at his burial place. This task was then undertaken by his family and his friends, or his friends and his coworkers. So in place of the preacher who then left the scene after he was fighting with them, there was an excommunicated bishop that officiated his burial instead in the presence of friends and cameras. David got the burial and funeral that he deserved. This murder is definitely one that will forever change the community, the LGBT community in Uganda, and puts an impact on the community for the world in general. Because here's a man who simply was just advocating for people like him. And I don't mean to say that in a bad way. People that identify within the community. He wanted to be an advocate for them, and an activist for them. And he simply lost his life because other people don't understand them. And I know me saying simply is a complex term for his death, but it's the only way I can put it. He lost his life because other people don't understand the choices that one makes. We all are not the same. We are all not born the same. We all are made differently because that's how we differentiate ourselves. If we all look the same, then we would all be in a cookie cutter world. We are all different. There is nobody else in the world like me. There is nobody else in the world like David Kato. There will never be another person like David Kato because he is David Kato. There is nobody to replace him, and there will always be somebody that will try to live in his honor. So that, my friends, is the true crime case of David Kato. What are your thoughts? Are you outraged like me? Do you think this is a cover-up murder? I am highly suspicious that this is a cover-up because they don't see homosexuality as another way of, they see it as a bad, they don't see it as a good. Being a homosexual is not a bad thing, which maybe the entire world needs to learn this. Being yourself is not a bad thing. You can be yourself and you can be happy, which that's what David Kato was trying to do, and he was trying to make others like him happy. So I hope you guys learned something from this case. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new. Turn the bell notification on to all, that way you know whenever I upload. And I'll see you guys tomorrow in a brand new video.